I am asked all the time this question. How did you get an interview with that person? So today I figured I would sit down and do a solo episode for you. Welcome to Famous with me, Jacy Valeras. This episode is going to be all about the famous people that I've had the opportunity to interview and how I got the interview with them. I'm going to kick things off with the biggest interview that I've probably had the opportunity to do, and that's Ringo Starr. Yes, I had the opportunity to interview a Beatle, and it still blows my mind that I got to even meet him, never mind have a conversation with him. These interviews always come up last minute. I actually almost missed the opportunity to do this interview because an email came into my email box and I never saw it. A few days before the actual event took place, I just happened to go in and check some missed messages, and I saw that I had an invite to attend the opening of the Musicians Hall of Fame exhibit for none other than Ringo Starr. A really good friend of mine who is a fantastic publicist was the one organizing this entire thing, and she invited me to come and be a part of this event. So of course, I emailed her immediately back and said, I really hope I'm not too late. I would love to be a part of this. Now, going into a media event like that, you never really know if you're going to actually get an interview. The hope is that there will be a media opportunity and that the artist will agree to answer a few questions. So I always like to prepare myself just in case. And this time I'm really glad I did because Ringo came into the room. He cut the ribbon on his new Musicians Hall of Fame exhibit, which featured some clothes that he wore when he was playing with the Beatles, his drum kit, so many incredible pieces. He cut the ribbon and then he did take a while to talk to all of the media. And he gave me a fantastic interview. So I walked up to him, introduced myself. One of the things that I wanted to have happen the most during that interview was to be able to tell him a little bit about my father because my dad passed away last year and he was such a big fan of the Beatles. He would have given anything to have been in that room. So I had the opportunity to tell Ringo all about my dad and then also follow that up with a few questions about the Musicians Hall of Fame and his career. And it will go down in history as not only probably my biggest interview, but also the interview that I was the most nervous for because I was physically shaking the entire time I was talking to him. And even though I was thinking about what he was saying and what I was saying, I was also thinking, I really hope Ringo does not see the fact that my hand holding this microphone is shaking so bad because I am so nervous. He was lovely though. He was amazing in every way and truly surpassed anything anyone had ever told me about him, which were all really good things. So that's how I got my interview with Ringo. And I'm really glad I checked my email that day and really glad I didn't miss responding to that because that would have been a huge mistake and a missed opportunity for me. The next big interview that I got that I am truly still to this day blown away about the fact that I got was my interview with Darius Rucker. When I was working for my previous news outlet that I was working at before I started my podcast, Darius Rucker was going to be getting the star on the Music City Walk of Fame here in Nashville. And I knew that I was going to be covering that event for the television network that I worked for. My production assistant at the time, her name is Crystal. She's actually now my co-producer on the television show that I host. She and I had a little conversation and she was like, what do you think the chances are that we can actually get a one-on-one interview with Darius Rucker? I am all for just reaching out and asking. So she did. She sent an email to his publicist and said, hey, we're going to be covering the Music City Walk of Fame inductions. Would love to have a few minutes with Darius Rucker. She heard back. I found out the night before I was going to be doing that interview with Darius that it was actually going to happen. When I was working for that outlet, normally I would get between 10 and 15 minutes to do an interview. So I prepared that amount of questions for Darius, centered around his career and about the fact that he was getting this incredible honor. So we get to the venue. Everyone is set up for the Music City Walk of Fame induction. They take me to a hotel across the street from where the whole pathway is, where all of the stars are lined up. And they usher me into the lobby. They say, you know, Darius is doing some other interviews and we'll come get you as soon as the interview is ready to take place. So I'm going over my notes in my head. I'm thinking of all the questions that I want to ask him. And They come back to get me, bring me up to this little holding room, which was kind of like a room that you would have a small reception in at a hotel. And they say, so here's the thing, Darius is a little behind schedule. The most we can give you is 4 minutes with him. So I look at my videographer and I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can do a 15-minute interview in 4 minutes. I am like rewriting the script in my head in real time as we're setting up the cameras, trying to check lighting, making sure that my mic works, that his mic is going to work. I'm doing all of these tests in real time. All of a sudden, they bring Darius in. He shakes my hand. I do the interview. I look at my videographer. I wrap it up 3 minutes and 59 seconds. That's knowing your time internally, which is from a lot of experience of doing this. But long story short, I got the interview with Darius. He was super nice, fantastic interview, probably one of my favorites that I've ever done. And then we got to go downstairs across the street and see him get his star on the Walk of Fame. So that is how I got my interview with Darius Rucker. The second interview that I'm probably most proud of getting was an interview that I didn't even actually do. And that's the interview with Naomi Judd that we had for my podcast, Country Music Success Stories, that I co-hosted with my friend Candy O'Terry. So ultimately what happened was I got to meet Naomi through a friend of mine, Kelly Lang. I was a humongous Judds fan growing up. It was my lifelong dream to meet Naomi. Anyone who knew me in my life knew that she was like my bucket list person. I have to meet Naomi Judd before I die. Everyone who has been associated with me in my career in Nashville has always told me, if we get the chance to introduce you to Naomi, we will introduce you. That never happened until this one day. I was home visiting family in Massachusetts and my phone rang. It was late at night and my friend Kelly called me and said, hey, you're not going to believe who I ran into at a party tonight, Naomi Judd. I had the chance to tell her all about you and she would like to take you to lunch. Oh my God. This was hands down the coolest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. I'm going to get to sit across the table from Naomi Judd and talk to her over lunch. Like, even to this day, I still cannot believe that that was something that happened to me. I cried when I found out that I was going to get that opportunity. Anyway, we go to lunch. She was absolutely lovely. I just fell in love with her even more than I had before I'd had the chance to know her personally. She was so kind. She wrote me the sweetest note that I still have framed on my desk. Her husband and I hit it off, and I ended up designing a website for him. Long story short, our relationship led to me being in a position to reach out and ask her for an interview. So when I started my podcast with Candy O'Terry, it was only supposed to be a 4-episode series where Candy was coming down here to do some interviews for her own podcast. So I set her up with some of my friends in country music. There were 4 artists that I got her an interview with. It was Naomi Judd, Crystal Gale, Jeannie Seeley, and my friend Kelly Lang. Those are the 4 people that I said, these women will have incredible stories for you to tell. So when it came down to it, we pitched the idea to Naomi. She said yes. We got to go to her house. We got to sit in her lovely podcast studio that she had built into her home. And Candy got to do the interview with her, which is, honestly, it was one of the coolest days of my life because I got to sit there. I was sitting on this little couch next to her. Naomi was in a higher chair sitting across the table from Candy. And throughout the interview, which lasted about an hour, Naomi would look at me and wink at me. And there were even a couple times during the interview where she couldn't think of song lyrics or song titles. And she looked at me and asked me during the interview, and I was able to interject and kind of prompt her a little bit. So that was one of the coolest interview experiences that I've ever had, even though I didn't have the chance to actually interview her myself. I was in the room, and it was really special that I was able to make that happen. The next interview that I was really proud to get, because it took me literally like 2 years to nail this one down, was Terri Clark. So I've been a Terri Clark fan for a super long time. I had been pitching her publicity team for the outlet that I worked with prior to doing my own show. I would say to them all the time, we really want to have Terri on. It would be great to be able to interview her. Nothing ever panned out. Our schedules never matched up, or I wouldn't get a response, or whatever would happen to make that not come through was happening over and over. So it took me about 2 years to be able to secure that interview. So when I started my podcast and my new television series, I reached out to her team again. Hello, I am so excited to be able to have the opportunity to feature Terri on the show if she is interested. And this time I got a yes. I was elated because I've been such a fan of hers for so long. We went down to Harper's Steakhouse here in Nashville before they opened to the public, and we had a beautiful set up for me and Terri, and she came in and we talked for a little bit before the interview happened, and then she sat down next to me, and it was an emotional interview actually. Both of us teared up a few times during the conversation. So it ended up being well worth the wait, and all of that ended up happening simply because I'd had a relationship with her PR team and I was consistent, and I had asked many times, not so many times that I became annoying, but I had asked them several times to see if they could make that happen. And eventually, when the right opportunity came around, it happened. And one really cool thing that happened during that interview was that Terri actually invited me and my husband and my co-producer Crystal to her Christmas show at Opryland. So after the interview happened a couple weeks later, we got to go to Opryland and see her show and experience all the Christmas magic that the hotel has to offer. It was a really cool experience and well worth the wait. So the last one I'm going to talk about is actually 2 interviews that I got separately, both cast members of General Hospital. I have been a fan of General Hospital since I was a kid. I watched it religiously with my sister growing up and was always such a big fan of Nancy Lee Grahn, who plays Alexis Davis, and Maurice Benard, who plays Sonny Corinthos. They were my 2 favorite characters on that show from when I was little. Fun fact, when I was in high school, I actually did an art project where I had to draw the cover of a soap opera digest, and it was a cover that had both Nancy and Maurice on the cover. So I feel like I manifested this to happen to me in my life, and we're just gonna go with that's how I made it happen. The reality is, I actually sent a blind email for both of those interviews. I reached out to their teams and said, hey, I have this podcast. I would really love to feature Nancy on the show. I'd really love to feature Maurice on the show. Would they be interested? The cool thing about my interview with Nancy is that there's a little bit of a history there. When I was in high school, I told you that I was such a fan of the show, such a fan of both of theirs. I actually had written Nancy a fan letter asking for her advice about graduating high school and then going on to pursue a career in the entertainment world. She wrote me a lovely letter back, encouraging me to do it, telling me to continue to educate myself while I was doing that. And that always held such a special place in my heart because she didn't have to reach out in such a personal way to me, but she took the time to do that. So when I ended up getting the interview with her, I had such a good feeling about it. Something really cool that actually happened on the day that I was supposed to do the original interview with Nancy, she ended up having to cancel that original date and reschedule for the following week. Normally, when I have these things happen, which I have these things happen a lot in artist schedule changes, or something happens where we have to revamp when the interview is going to be, I always get a message from somebody on their team saying, hey, so-and-so isn't able to make it today. Something came up. Can we reschedule? This particular day that I had my scheduled interview with Nancy, I remember I was sitting in my kitchen and my phone rang, and it was a Los Angeles phone number. And I was like, I don't really know anyone in Los Angeles, but I'm going to pick this up. So I answer the phone. This woman on the other line is like, hey, is this Jacy? Yes, it is. She's like, hey, Jacy, it's Nancy Lee Grahn. Oh my God. I literally, even to this day, I literally cannot believe Nancy Lee Grahn called my phone. I had a heart attack. And also, for the record, I have been around famous people for many, many, many years. I've interviewed them. I've worked with them. They have become my friends. Nancy Lee Grahn, Alexis Davis from General Hospital called my phone, and I nearly had a heart attack and died. I hope I played it cool on the phone. I'll have to ask her. I think I played it pretty cool when we were talking, but she called me and she's like, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to reschedule. XYZ happened and we're going to have to make it for next week. She was super sweet. We ended up talking on the phone for like 10 minutes too. It was not just a, hey, I've got to cancel. Can we reschedule? She was super personable. And I knew from that moment that she was going to be an amazing interview. So we rescheduled for the following week and the interview came out great. One of my favorites ever. And then I ended up getting to interview Maurice, which it was just such a dream come true. a lifelong fan, had a huge crush on Sonny Corinthos when I was in high school. Sorry, Mike. He was lovely and wonderful, and we had a great conversation. Probably my most emotional interview that I've ever done was my interview with Maurice. So both of them turned out to be incredible, and I just can't believe that both of them came from me sending an email to their team saying, "Hey, I'm Jacy. Here's what I've done. Here's my podcast. Would you consider doing an interview with me?" And they said yes. So at some point, I guess my resume does speak for itself, and I am forever grateful for that. So, anyway, I hope you liked listening to a few of my stories about how some of these interviews have been booked. If you enjoy listening to my podcast, the biggest thing that I can ask from you is to leave a podcast review for me, because that just helps the show grow. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to my channel or like the video. I would appreciate it more than you know, and it goes so much further than you think. I guess that's all for today. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.